Evan Hale had lived alone on the Orion Belt refueling outpost for almost 8 months. And in all that time, he had learned one truth. Space could be crowded, yet still feel painfully empty. Every day, he checked fuel lines, repaired drones, cleaned solar filters, and sent reports that no one really read. Ships rarely visited this far-off place, unless they were desperate or lost. Silence had become part of his routine, something he accepted without complaint. But tonight felt different. The outpost lights flickered as a storm of charged particles passed through the region. Evan was tightening a panel near the main hatch when he heard something strange, a soft tapping sound, almost like fingernails scratching metal. He paused, listening. The sound came again, weak but clear. He frowned. It wasn't the rhythm of a damaged drone, nor the scrape of metal under pressure. It sounded alive. He walked to the control panel beside the hatch. But even before he reached it, the tapping grew louder, sharper, as if whoever or whatever was outside had gathered enough courage to ask for help properly. Evan hesitated for a moment. Out here, opening a door without scanning could be dangerous, but something in the sound felt desperate, like a small creature running out of strength. He ran a quick thermal check. The scan showed a tiny heat signature, too small to be an adult, too warm to be machinery. It wasn't a threat, it was a child. Evan unlocked the hatch and pulled it open just enough to see outside. The cold air from the unpressurized docking platform rushed in, brushing against his face. At first he saw nothing. Then his eyes lowered to the ground. A small alien child no more than 8 human years old stood in front of him. Her skin had a faint silver glow, and her large violet eyes looked up at him with fear and hunger. Her thin arms wrapped around her stomach as if she were trying to hold herself together. She was trembling so hard her little fingers tapped on the metal floor. Evan's heart tightened. He had seen Virian species only from distance, in old communication logs. They were known everywhere for their warrior culture and proud traditions. But this child looked nothing like a strong fighter. She looked like a lost little girl who hadn't eaten in days. He slowly knelt so he wouldn't scare her. "Hey there. You okay?" His voice was soft, almost a whisper. The child tried to speak, but only a dry sound came out. Her lips cracked when she opened her mouth. Evan gently reached into his pocket and took out a protein bar. He unwrapped it halfway and held it out to her without moving closer. She stared at the food, then at him, unsure if it was safe. Evan nodded encouragingly. "It's all right. Go ahead." She stepped forward slowly, like someone expecting the ground to break beneath her feet. When her cold fingers brushed the bar, she snatched it quickly and stuffed it into her mouth. She ate with a speed that shocked him, like she feared someone might take it away. Evan felt a heavy ache in his chest. "You must be really hungry." When she finished, she looked up at him again, eyes shining with something close to gratitude. She whispered, her voice soft and airy, "Zyra." He understood. "Your name is Zyra?" She nodded. Evan smiled gently. "I'm Evan." Before he could ask anything else, a sudden wave of pressure passed through the platform. It felt like the air thickened, then twisted. Evan instinctively reached for Zyra, pulling her closer to him. The lights in the landing bay dimmed as a shadow fell across the entrance. Someone stepped forward. She was tall, almost 2 heads taller than Evan, and her armor looked battered from battle. Her silver skin was darker than Zyra's, her violet eyes sharp like a blade. A wide crack ran across her shoulder armor, and dried marks hinted at earlier injuries. She carried herself like someone who had fought too long without rest. Evan recognized her species instantly. Virian, a full-grown warrior. His heart jumped. He held Zyra protectively, unsure if he should step back or raise his hands. The woman's eyes fixed on the child. First fear flashed across her face, then deep relief. She closed the distance with quick steps and pulled Zyra into her arms. The child clung to her mother tightly. The woman pressed her forehead against Zyra's, whispering something in a language Evan didn't understand. When she lifted her head again, her attention turned fully to him. Her expression was intense, not threatening, but filled with emotion so strong it almost frightened him. You fed my child, she said in a low, steady voice. Her basic was accented but clear. Human. You fed my hungry child? Evan swallowed. She needed help. The woman took a step closer. Even injured, her presence was powerful. Among my people, such an act carries weight. It is not forgotten. She lowered herself to one knee, the highest form of Vyrian respect. Evan froze, completely shocked. My name is Sirexa, she said. I am general of the Vyrian 9th Legion. She looked up, her fierce eyes softening for the first time. You have saved what is most precious to me. I will do what you want, human. Whatever you ask, I will repay. Evan felt a rush of discomfort. He had never been bowed to in his life, especially not by a warrior from a species known for their pride. Please, you don't have to do that. I didn't help her because I wanted something. She was hungry. Sirexa studied him for a moment, reading his sincerity. She didn't stand yet. Instead, her gaze shifted back to Zyra, who held onto Evan's sleeve like she didn't want to let go. That small gesture surprised Sirexa. Her daughter, shy even among their own people, rarely reached for strangers. But here she was, trusting this human. Sirexa rose slowly, her movements heavy with exhaustion. We were attacked, she said quietly. A rogue group ambushed our fleet. Ships were destroyed, soldiers scattered. I escaped with only my daughter. We have been running for too long. Her voice cracked slightly at the end, like the weight of the journey was finally showing. Zyra pressed her face into her mother's armor, but her small hand still held Evan's sleeve, refusing to release him completely. Evan's breath softened. You're safe here, both of you. Come inside. It's warm, and she needs food. Real food. Sirexa stared at him, stunned again by how freely he offered help. Most species feared Vyrians, not invited them into their shelter. But Evan didn't hesitate. She finally nodded. Very well. He led them into the outpost, keeping an eye on Zyra as she walked with unsteady steps. Inside, the lights were warm, the air breathable, and the machines hummed gently, comforting after so much danger. Evan rushed to the tiny kitchen unit and prepared more food. Zyra ate slowly this time, not rushing, as if she trusted that he would keep giving more if she needed. Sirexa watched every motion, every bite, her sharp eyes softening again. Evan noticed her watching him. Do you want something too? You look like you haven't eaten in days. She hesitated but eventually accepted a ration pack. Even while eating, she stayed alert, scanning the room, listening for sounds outside. Evan realized she must have been living in constant fear, trying to keep her child alive with no resources, no allies, and no safe place to land. After Zyra finished, the little girl leaned her head on Evan's shoulder. Sirexa stiffened at first, not used to seeing her daughter close to anyone else, but she said nothing. The moment was calm, peaceful even until the outpost alarms suddenly flashed red. Evan jerked his head toward the screen. No, please don't tell me. Sirexa was already moving, pulling Zyra behind her while her other hand grabbed her damaged weapon. What is it? She demanded. Evan stared at the scanner, dread rising. A ship. Large. It's entering orbit. His fingers shook slightly as he read the signature. It's not a trader. Not a rescue team. Sirexa's face hardened. They have found us. Zyra grabbed Evan's arm tightly, fear returning to her trembling body. Evan stepped between the mother and child and the door, instinct guiding him more than thought. Sirexa looked at him with surprise and something deeper respect. Human, you should hide. This fight is not yours. But Evan shook his head. She came to my door hungry and scared. That makes it my fight. Zyra's small fingers tightened around his sleeve. Sirexa's breath caught for a moment, seeing the human's courage. The lights flickered again as the enemy ship descended. The peaceful outpost was no longer quiet. Danger was approaching, and Evan realized his simple act of kindness had already changed his life forever. The alarm lights washed the walls in a pulsing red glow, turning the quiet outpost into a place filled with tension. Evan felt the vibration of engines from above, deep and heavy, as if the enemy ship wanted the whole station to feel its arrival. Zyra clung to Evan's sleeve, shaking with fear. Sorexa stepped forward, placing herself between the scanner screen and her daughter, her injured armor catching the red light in sharp lines. Evan forced himself to stay calm. "They're landing at the south platform," he said quietly, reading the path of the ship. "That platform is closest to the fuel tanks. If they blast through," Sorexa finished his sentence in a cold voice, "the entire outpost will explode." Evan nodded. He swallowed hard as the weight of the situation became clear. He had faced storms, radiation zones, and equipment failures, but nothing like this. These were fighters, trained ones, and they were here for Zyra. Zyra's small voice broke the silence, weak but frightened. "They want me, Mama." Sorexa knelt to Zyra's height and placed both hands on her daughter's shoulders. Her voice softened, though fear trembled underneath. "They will not touch you," she promised. "Not while I am alive." Evan noticed Sorexa's hands shaking slightly. She had been running too long, wounded for too long, protecting Zyra with nothing but her strength. She was exhausted, yet she still tried to hide it for her daughter's sake. Evan stepped beside them. "We can't fight them head-on," he said, "but we can slow them down. Maybe hold them off until..." "Until what?" Sorexa asked. "My people do not know where we are. No ships will come." Evan paused, then shook his head. "Doesn't matter. If they break in, we're finished. But this outpost is full of equipment. I can trap corridors, seal doors, overload lights. Anything that buys us time." Sorexa studied him with sharp eyes. She expected humans to be afraid. She expected them to hide. But Evan stood there, steady and ready to help. It confused her. It moved her. It scared her in a different way, not because he was dangerous, but because he was willingly risking himself for someone not even of his own species. "You do not have to do this, human," she said quietly. "I know," Evan replied. "I want to." Zyra looked up at him with wide eyes, as if she didn't fully understand why he cared, but she felt comfort from his calm voice. She held onto his sleeve again, gripping tightly. Evan gently touched her small hand and gave her a reassuring smile. "You'll be okay, both of you." The ship outside screeched as it landed, metal grinding against metal. The outpost walls trembled. Sorexa stood immediately, her spear glowing faintly as she activated its last working charge. Her armor might have been damaged, her strength weakened, but she still looked like a warrior ready to protect her child with her life. She looked at Evan. "What do you need from me?" Keep them busy in the main hallway," he answered. "I'll set traps ahead of you. If they get past you, they'll trigger the systems." Sorexa nodded and moved toward the main entrance. Evan rushed toward the equipment bay, his mind racing. Every tool he'd ever learned, every system he'd ever repaired, suddenly felt important. He grabbed cables, magnetic plates, emergency locks, and a portable control pad. He breathed deeply, forcing fear out of his mind. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't trained to fight. But he knew machines, and he knew this outpost better than anyone. If he couldn't win a battle with strength, he would win with strategy. He set the first magnetic plate near the floor at the beginning of the corridor. Anyone stepping on it would be thrown off balance as the plate activated. The second trap overloaded the lights in the hallway, ready to blind anyone who stepped past it. The third trap was a pressure door that he could seal remotely, trapping the attackers inside if needed. He worked fast, sweat dripping down his forehead. The outpost speakers crackled with the sound of boots hitting metal. Many boots. Evan's heartbeat quickened. Sorexa's voice came through the intercom near him. "They have entered the main hall." He sprinted toward the corridor, stopping at the corner where Sorexa waited, spear in hand. Zyra was hidden deeper inside the outpost. Behind protective panels Evan sealed around her. The little girl watched everything with wide, frightened eyes. Sorexa stood tall, ready. Evan crouched behind her to activate the traps. The enemy soldiers came into view. Their black armor reflected no light, giving them a ghostly appearance. They moved in tight formation, weapons drawn, their steps confident. They weren't expecting much resistance, just a wounded Vyrian general and a small human outpost. The first soldier stepped on the magnetic plate. A pulse flashed beneath him, lifting him off the ground and slamming him into the wall. Confusion broke through their disciplined formation. Before they could adjust, Evan triggered the lights. A white burst shocked the corridor, causing the soldiers to stumble and shield their eyes. Sorexa charged forward with a strength that made Evan forget she was exhausted. Her spear sliced through the air with precise, controlled movements. She knocked weapons aside, dodged their strikes, and attacked with enough force to send two soldiers crashing into each other. Evan watched her with awe. Even weakened, she fought like someone who had survived countless battles. Her movements were fast, practiced, almost beautiful in their precision, but more soldiers flooded in. She fought them off, but Evan could see her slowing. Her armor sparked where it was cracked. Her breaths grew heavier. Sweat covered her forehead. She was pushing her limits. Evan triggered the second trap. The pressure door behind the soldiers slammed shut with a loud bang, trapping them and limiting their space to move. They cursed and tried to break the door, but the narrow space gave Sorexa an advantage. Still, one soldier slipped past her defense and aimed a stun device at her back. Evan reacted without thinking. He grabbed a metal tool from the ground and threw it at the soldier with all the strength he had. It hit the soldier's helmet hard enough to disrupt his aim. The stun blast shot into the wall instead of Sorexa. The soldier turned toward Evan, furious, but Sorexa used the moment to strike him down. She looked back at Evan, a flash of surprise in her eyes. "You fight," she said breathlessly. "Even without weapons." "I'm not letting them hurt her," Evan replied. "Or you." Her expression softened for a heartbeat before she turned back to the battle. But the corridor suddenly shook with a heavy impact. A louder, deeper tone echoed through the hall. The enemy commander had arrived. He walked through the trapped soldiers like they were nothing. His armor thicker and more advanced than the rest. A glowing mark on his chest pulsed with energy. His eyes were cold and fixed on Sorexa. "Give us the child," he said in a chilling voice. "You know what we want." Sorexa stood her ground, lifting her spear even though her arms trembled slightly. "You will not touch her." The commander tilted his head. "You are weakened, General. You cannot win." Evan stepped forward, standing beside Sorexa even though his heart hammered painfully. "She's not alone." The commander blinked, genuinely surprised that a human would stand against him. "You protect an alien child? Why?" Evan didn't hesitate. "Because she needed someone. Because she was hungry. Because she was scared. Isn't that enough?" The commander stared at him for a long moment. Then he laughed, a sharp, cold sound. "Humans are strange creatures, brave but foolish." More soldiers moved forward, overpowering the traps Evan set. Sorexa braced herself, but her legs nearly buckled. Evan realized she couldn't fight much longer. He touched her arm. "Fall back. We need another plan." Sorexa nodded reluctantly. "We fall back together." They retreated slowly, step by step, while the commander advanced. Zyra watched from behind the sealed panel, tears streaming down her face. She reached out as if she could pull them to safety. Evan met her eyes and forced a smile. "We're okay. Stay hidden." Sorexa's hand brushed Evan's shoulder, steadying herself. They knew what the commander wanted. They knew he wouldn't stop. And now, the battle for the child had truly begun. Evan and Sorexa moved backward through the corridor as the enemy commander advanced with calm, steady steps. His armor glowed in faint red lines that pulsed like a heartbeat. Every step he took made the outpost floor vibrate. He was confident, completely sure of his victory. Evan felt that confidence like a cold wind brushing against him, threatening to steal his courage. But Zyra's frightened eyes stayed in his mind, and that was enough to make him stand his ground. Sorexa's breathing grew heavier, and her movements slowed. Even though she tried to hide it, Evan could see her pain. She had pushed herself far beyond her limits. Her armor was cracked, her spear had lost its charge, and her muscles trembled every time she lifted her weapon. She needed rest, but rest was impossible here. They rounded a corner and reached the inner control chamber, where Evan had stored some maintenance drones. He quickly sealed the door behind them, buying at least a few seconds. Sorexa leaned against the wall, closing her eyes. Sweat dripped from her forehead, and her hands trembled. "You're hurt," Evan said. "I have been hurt for days," she replied quietly. "But my child must live. That is all that matters." Evan admired her strength, yet he couldn't help feeling frustrated too. "You can't protect her alone. Not like this." Sorexa opened her eyes and looked at him. What she saw in his face surprised her determination, not fear. "You risked your life for her," she said softly. "You are human, yet you act like a warrior of my people." "I'm not a warrior," Evan answered. "I'm an engineer." Sorexa's lips curved into a tired smile. "Engineers save more lives than warriors sometimes." The door behind them shook violently. A loud bang followed, and part of the frame bent inward. The commander was breaking through. Evan rushed to the maintenance drones and activated them. They buzzed to life, hovering like small metal insects. "I can program them to distract him," Evan said. "They won't stop him, but they can slow him down." Sorexa pushed herself off the wall. "I will hold him. You move Zyra to safety." Evan shook his head instantly. "No. I'm not leaving you alone." The door cracked. A sharp line of light appeared down the middle. "You must," Sorexa said firmly. "If Zyra falls into their hands, the galaxy will suffer. They want her genetic key. They will use her to activate ancient machines from our homeworld machines built for war." Evan didn't know much about Vyrian technology, but Sorexa's fear told him enough. If they wanted Zyra for something dangerous, he couldn't allow her to be taken, but he couldn't let Sorexa face the commander alone either. The door exploded inward with a shower of sparks. The commander stepped through the smoke, unharmed. His red armor glowing brighter now. The drones rushed toward him, firing small bursts of energy and flashing bright lights. He swatted them away like flies, but the delay gave Sorexa time to step forward. Her legs trembled, yet she planted her feet firmly. "Stay back, Evan," she said. Evan didn't stay back. He moved beside her, holding a metal bar he found earlier. It wasn't a real weapon, but his grip tightened around it. The commander stopped a few steps away, studying the scene with a calm expression. "You continue to resist," he said. "A wounded general. A weak human. Pointless." Sorexa lifted her spear. "My daughter is behind that door. That is not pointless. And you? Human?" the commander asked, turning his glowing eyes toward Evan. "Why do you fight for a child that is not yours?" Evan felt his heart beat harder, but he didn't look away. "Because she needed someone," he said. "Because she ran to my door hungry and scared. Because doing nothing is worse than losing." The commander tilted his head slowly, as if trying to understand something beyond logic. "Strange," he said. "Humans risk themselves for no gain. You act without reason." Evan exhaled. "Sometimes things worth protecting don't need a reason." The commander raised his arm, energy crackling around his gauntlet. Sorexa lunged forward to strike first, but her strength had faded. Her attack was slower than before. The commander blocked her easily and threw her aside. She hit the wall hard and collapsed, gasping. Evan shouted her name and rushed toward her, but the commander blocked his way. Evan swung the metal bar with all his strength, hitting the commander's arm. The strike barely dented the armor, but it made the commander pause for one full second. That was enough for Evan to trigger a hidden command on the control pad he hid in his pocket. The floor beneath the commander lit up. A magnetic surge exploded upward, lifting the commander off his feet and throwing him backward a few steps. His armor sparked. He steadied himself quickly. But the trap bought precious time. Evan ran to Sorexa, helping her stand. Her legs wobbled, but she gripped his arm tightly, fighting to stay upright. "You should have run," she whispered. "I can't leave you," Evan replied. The commander advanced again, slower this time, testing his footing. "Your tricks delay me," he said. "But they will not save you." Evan's mind raced. He needed more time. He needed anything. He pressed a sequence on the control pad, activating a heavy emergency door behind them. "Sorexa, we fall back." She nodded, barely able to stand but still gripping her spear. Together they retreated into the next chamber, and Evan sealed the door. The metal groaned under the commander's strikes, but it held at least for a little longer. Inside, Zyra stood trembling behind a stack of crates. The moment she saw Sorexa, she ran to her mother, hugging her tightly. Sorexa winced from the pain, but wrapped her arms around her daughter anyway, pulling her close. "Mama," Zyra whispered. "I'm here," Sorexa murmured. "I won't let anyone take you." Evan looked at them, feeling a deep ache inside. He didn't know how long they could keep running. The commander was too strong. They needed something bigger than traps and bravery. Suddenly, he remembered something. The fuel line valves. The outpost's south platform machinery held enough pressure that if released at the right moment, it could create a violent blast, not enough to destroy the outpost completely, but enough to push back an attacker. Evan turned to Sorexa. "I have an idea. It's risky, but it might work." Sorexa lifted her head. "Tell me." Evan explained quickly. They needed to lure the commander into the south platform maintenance area. Then Evan would trigger the pressure release at the perfect moment. The blast would throw the commander and his soldiers back, giving them a chance to escape to the emergency shuttle. Sorexa listened carefully, nodding slowly. "It could work," she said. "But one of us must stay behind to trigger the release." "I can do it from the panel," Evan said. "Once he's inside, I hit the switch. Then run." Sorexa shook her head. "The panel is close to the blast zone. It's the only way," Evan said. "We don't have time." Zyra looked between them, her violet eyes full of fear. "Evan, don't go." He knelt beside her. "I'll be okay," he promised softly. "You need to get to the shuttle with your mother." The door behind them cracked again. The commander was almost through. Evan stood and took a deep breath. He was scared, more scared than he had ever been, but Zyra's small hand gripping his sleeve gave him strength. Sorexa placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch surprisingly gentle. "You fight like a Vyrian," she said. "You have earned honor today." Evan offered a weak smile. "Let's just survive this first." They prepared quickly. Evan moved to the maintenance corridor while Sorexa carried Zyra toward the emergency exit. The commander finally broke through the door and stormed forward, stepping exactly where Evan wanted him. Evan darted behind a pillar and hit the switch. A deep rumble echoed through the platform. The pressure release activated. In a split second, a massive burst of force shot through the chamber. The commander was thrown backward violently, crashing against the far wall. Sparks flew from his armor as he struggled to move. Evan didn't wait. He ran. The blast pushed him too, sending him tumbling across the ground, but he forced himself up and sprinted toward the exit, where Sorexa and Zyra waited. The outpost shook again. The enemy soldiers shouted behind him. Evan reached the door just as Sorexa pulled him inside and sealed it. "You made it," she breathed, relief flooding her face. Zyra ran into his arms, hugging him tightly. Evan held her close, trembling from adrenaline. "You're safe now," he whispered. But deep inside, he knew the battle was not finished. The commander would rise again, and when he did, the final confrontation would decide everything. The emergency corridor shook as Evan, Sorexa, and Zyra ran toward the shuttle bay. The blast from the pressure valves had slowed the commander, but Evan knew it wouldn't stop him for long. That man felt less like a soldier and more like a storm knocked down for a moment but always rising again. And somewhere behind them, the sound of metal scraping the floor echoed faintly, like something dragging itself forward. Zyra looked over her shoulder, fear widening her violet eyes. "He's coming," she whispered. Sorexa tightened her grip on her daughter's hand. She was limping now, favoring her right leg, and her breathing came in shallow, painful bursts. But her eyes stayed sharp, focused on getting Zyra to safety. Evan felt a twist in his chest seeing how hard she fought just to stay on her feet. "We're close," Evan said, trying to keep his voice steady. The shuttle bay is just ahead. When not 7D this, the corridor opened into a wide chamber where a small emergency craft rested on its landing pads. The shuttle was old, scratched, and barely maintained, but it was their only way out. Evan rushed to the control panel beside the boarding ramp and activated the power sequence. The shuttle's engines hummed to life. Lights inside flickering, Sorexa guided Zyra up the ramp, but before she followed her daughter inside, she paused and turned back toward Evan. "You did well," she said. "My people would honor someone like you." Evan shook his head with a small smile. "Let's survive first. Then you can honor me." Sorexa almost smiled back, but her expression changed suddenly. Her eyes narrowed as she listened carefully. Evan heard it too, the unmistakable sound of heavy footsteps. The commander had found them again. A cold wind of dread swept through the chamber. Evan quickly pressed the ramp control, trying to lift it. But the system beeped in protest. "Ramp is jammed," he said under his breath. "It won't close unless someone fixes the sensor." "How long?" Sorexa asked. "A minute," Evan said. "We don't have a minute." The door at the far end of the chamber slid open violently. Smoke and sparks flew out. And then the commander stepped through. His armor was damaged, cracks glowed faintly across his chest, and his movements were slower, but his eyes burned with cold determination. He looked at Evan first, then Sorexa, then Zyra. "You should have surrendered the child," he said. "Now you all suffer." Sorexa stepped in front of Zyra, raising her spear, even though her hands trembled. "She is under my protection," she said. "You will not harm her. And you, human," the commander said, turning his gaze toward Evan. "Why continue to stand in my way? You have nothing to gain." Evan didn't know where the courage came from, but he stepped forward. "You want her for your machines. She's a child, not a tool." "That's reason enough." The commander's mouth tightened. "Bravery without strength is meaningless." "Maybe," Evan said. "But bravery with purpose isn't." The commander walked closer. Evan could feel the floor shake under his steps. Sorexa moved to block him, but Evan touched her arm. "Fix the ramp," he whispered. "I'll hold him." Sorexa looked at him like he had lost his mind. "You cannot fight him." "I don't need to beat him," Evan said quietly. "Just delay him." For a moment, Sorexa didn't answer. Her eyes filled with emotions she couldn't express: fear, respect, disbelief. Then she nodded and limped to the side panel, dragging herself toward the malfunctioning sensor. Zyra stayed near the top of the ramp, tears running down her face. "Evan, don't," he smiled at her softly. "I'll be okay. Trust me." The commander came closer, his shadow stretching long across the floor. Evan gripped a loose metal rod in his hands, feeling its weight. It wasn't enough to damage the commander's armor, but maybe he could distract him long enough for Sorexa to fix the ramp. "You fight without weapon, without armor," the commander said. "You think spirit alone can stop me?" Evan lifted the rod anyway. "I think spirit can do more than you expect." The commander lunged forward, faster than before. Evan barely dodged, rolling across the floor and coming up with a gasp. The commander struck again, and Evan used the rod to block, the impact sending pain shooting up his arms. He stumbled backward but stayed on his feet. Sorexa glanced at him while working on the sensor panel. "Keep moving," she shouted. "Do not let him pin you." Evan tried. The commander swung with brutal strength, shattering the rod in two. Evan jumped back as the broken pieces clattered across the floor. Now he had nothing to defend himself with, but he still had his mind. He ran toward the fuel pipes along the wall. The commander followed, thinking Evan was trying to escape. Evan grabbed a loose pipe valve and twisted hard. A spray of cold vapor shot out, covering the area in a white mist. It didn't harm the commander, but it made him stop for a moment, trying to see through the fog. Evan ran again, trying to buy seconds, anything that kept the commander away from the shuttle. But the commander was clever too. He saw Evan's path and predicted his movement. When Evan turned a corner, the commander was already there. He grabbed Evan by the shirt and lifted him off the ground. Evan kicked wildly, trying to break free. But the commander's grip was like iron. "You delay the inevitable," the commander said. "You will fall. The child will be taken." Evan struggled for breath. "Not today." The commander raised his other hand, ready to strike a final blow, but a sharp, glowing spear blade suddenly pierced the air near his face. "Put him down." Sorexa stood there, spear in hand, eyes blazing. She looked ready to collapse, yet somehow stronger than ever. The commander released Evan, who fell to the ground coughing. "You cannot protect him," the commander said. "No," Sorexa replied. "But I can protect my family." Her words echoed across the chamber. Family. Zyra, Sorexa, Evan. The commander attacked, and Sorexa blocked with renewed strength. The chamber filled with sparks and echoes as spear and armored gauntlet clashed. Evan forced himself back to his feet, steadying his breathing. He needed to help. He couldn't let Sorexa fight alone. "Sensor fixed," Sorexa shouted between strikes. "Evan, close the ramp." Evan ran to the panel and slammed his hand onto the control. The ramp began to rise slowly. Very slowly. Zyra reached out her hands toward him, pleading silently. "Come," she cried. Evan turned toward Sorexa. She pushed the commander back with a hard thrust, but he recovered instantly. She couldn't hold him much longer. "Sorexa," Evan yelled. "Get in." She pushed the commander one last time and ran toward the shuttle, grabbing Evan's arm to pull him along. They stumbled up the ramp together as it lifted. The commander roared and lunged forward, grabbing the ramp's edge. His fingers dug into the metal, stopping it from rising. Sorexa fell, pulling Evan with her. The ramp shuddered as the commander tried to climb up. Zyra screamed, reaching for her mother. Evan, desperate, grabbed a heavy toolbox beside him and swung it down with all his strength onto the commander's hand. The impact shook the ramp. The commander growled in pain, losing his grip for a second. It was enough. Sorexa kicked hard, knocking his hand loose. The ramp finally lifted fully, sealing shut. Evan collapsed to the floor, breathing hard. Sorexa lay beside him, exhausted, but alive. Zyra ran to them and hugged both tightly, tears streaming down her face. "You're safe. You're both safe." The shuttle engines roared, lifting them away from the damaged outpost. Through the small window, Evan could see the commander shrinking in the distance, slowly getting to his feet, but too late to stop them. Sorexa turned to Evan, her voice soft. "You protected my child. You protected me." Evan rubbed the back of his neck, embarrassed. "I just did what anyone would." "No," Sorexa said. "Not anyone. Only you." Zyra rested her head on Evan's shoulder. Sorexa watched them both with an expression Evan had never seen on her face. Warm, grateful, peaceful. "My people owe you a great debt," Sorexa said. "And I owe you far more. You are not just human to us now. You are part of our life, part of our family." Evan felt heat rise in his chest, emotion he hadn't expected. "Then, I guess I'm going with you?" Sorexa nodded. "Where we go, you go." Zyra smiled, wrapping her small arms around him again. Outside the window, stars stretched across the darkness, guiding them toward a new beginning. Evan Hale, an ordinary human engineer, had changed everything with a simple act of kindness. He fed a hungry child, and gained a family he never imagined.